This place is kind of murky. It's been snowing and stuff. Loch Ness actually has been creepy for a while, seemingly back to the Ice Age. So Loch Ness is a really interesting and creepy place. And part of it is that there was a long before the Ice Age. I think there were many ice ages, but I'll just say the Ice Age. Before the Ice Age, there's a massive earthquake that basically tore apart Scotland, what we would now call Scotland, and leaving this major rift, this thing, which then got its own little glaciers. You know, they were available, so it got some glaciers, and then as they melted, it created three lakes, of which we will be talking about Loch Ness today. A responsible researcher would have the name of all three lakes. If you know a responsible researcher like that, put their name in the comments. But Loch Ness. So everybody knows it calls it the monster. Okay, we'll come back to that. And we'll keep coming back to that because that seems to be sort of the thread that runs through it. It's older in that regard than one might think. Most people know of it from like, oh, well, in the 1930s, his guy got this photograph, which was later called a hoax. You wouldn't want to scare people away from the gloomy destination spot.
And I'll interject real quick. I believe that is referred to as the surgeon's photo. I think that's the name of it.
Yeah, I think it's actually like, and I think technically that's like the second photo, really, right? It's like the one that's like definitely a hoax of the first one was something else or something. I don't think it was.
Yeah, which
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it is in fact real, but it was like, I think that it was likely, which this might come back to sea otters or something of it. And the other one, the one that you're talking about, that I think that one was the one where it was like definitely a hoax. Like they got like props and things and built stuff.
Yeah.
You know, the other one might have been like just a coincidental, like, oh, there's something there. You know, and then it was sea otter.
So there's a time when it was easy to create fake.
Yeah, those were the days,
hoaxes,
man.
Right? And now here we go again. Because now I could be like, yo, I have a freaking Loch Ness Monster bite, which would apparently probably be like my entire torso.
Yeah.
I somehow survived it due to my rigorous calisthenics. You believe that? I've got a space in Loch Ness to sell you. And then, we've got the, I could have footage, but it could all be fake, right? It could all be AI. It could be, how do you know the bite's real? How do you know I'm real? You don't.
Are you the Loch Ness Monster?
Cut to the chase. This has to last. Okay, I'm dragging this out as long as I can. Damn it. I'm dragging it out as long as I can. That's not right. That was like Arnold Schwarzenegger meets. Sorry, Arnold. Sorry, Scotland. All right.
So Loch Ness, you're talking history a little bit. You're giving us a history lesson, which is something I always need because, see previous episode.
Well, let's just talk about the spooky history of it. Okay, so we've got a couple main things we'll be talking about. I'm wearing my Jurassic Park shirt because part of what we'll be talking about is the possible prehistoric creatures that are still living there.
Not a sponsor.
Not a sponsor.
We're not
Jurassic Park is not. Is not.
I heard they closed that place down
while they reassess their safety protocols. I definitely just drank the wrong tea, which is 700 degrees. The one I have sitting over here in front of the fan is only 400 degrees. I'll drink from that one. All right, so settled by various peoples forever, and as most of those places, taken over by peoples forever. We have the first report of a monster in the mid 500s. 566, I believe, is the date, and Saint Columba. And there was a report of a swimmer attacked by a creature in what's called the River Ness, which is on the north end of Loch Ness. And is attacked by this creature. When people get attacked by creatures at that point, now they call us, but they called saints at that point. So they called St. Columba. They said, hey, you got some sway. And St. Columba came out and demonstrating the power of God over mysterious creatures, made it flee into the loch, where apparently it has been for the last 1,500 years or so. Okay, there's stories. It's we'll come back to the monster. Because we put it there. It's not going anywhere. It's been there for 1,500 years. It can stay for 15 minutes or so. And we're going to talk about Boleskine House. Because okay, so first of all, Loch Ness, it's geographically speaking, it's super deep. It's something like 812 feet deep. And yes, I'm going to do it in feet.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's I did a little bit of because I don't know much about Loch Ness, but I did look it up, and when I saw it was that deep, I was trying to do some comparisons to other extreme, like something like the Great Lakes, right? Yeah, like the and see what they are. And I think Lake Superior is like 1,300 feet deep at its deepest, so it's like that's deeper, but like it's also massive. Where Loch Ness is actually pretty small for being as deep as it is. Like so it's like it's like. I mean, in compare, like Lake Superior is almost like, it's calling it a lake might be underselling the size of it. It's more like a gulf or something like that, or a bay. Just happens to be locked in. No pun. But yeah, so that is pretty significant in depth for a fairly small lake, so just a
yeah.
I'll also add real quick for our international friends, 800 feet, approximately 80-story building. Figure about that height. Massively deep.
Building. Yeah. And if you put an 80-story building in Loch Ness, it would be a liminal space inside of a liminal space. It would be metaliminal. It is dark, and not because of the monster stories. It apparently has a lot of peat, which interferes with visibility issues and makes it very, very dark, and a good place for monsters to hide. If you're interested in a hiding place in Loch Ness, send us an email at monsters request at Loch Ness. Wait, we don't know Loch Ness.com.
It's also just it's also very cold too. Like
extremely cold.
Yeah, so it's like there's it's, I mean, not that Scotland's exactly the warmest place, but definitely Loch Ness is apparently it's very.
It's the warmest place when it comes to the hearts of its people.
Yes,
I believe. And so we've got there's a lot of peat in there. Also, because of the peat, because of the shape of it, it has really, really weird acoustics. And the acoustics, if you're going to pick a place for a long-lasting monster conspiracy, it's hard to get a better place except for outer space or the moon itself. Okay, because the acoustics make it really, really hard to scan it. Because the sonar creates interference patterns and things like that make things look bigger than they are or more solid than they are and things like that. So it creates all kinds of problems for scientific research. In the interest of science, I said I was going to leave the monster, and here I am again. See, you keep coming, it keeps coming back, and I do too. And so they did I'll save the DNA thing. I'll save it for later. But
you were talking about the sonar thing. Wasn't there there was something that I bumped across this is something along the lines of like one of the things they found was actually like the wreck from something that they used as a set for a Sherlock Holmes movie or something.
I missed that.
It was sunk in there. Yeah, they were doing like I think it was like I don't know if it's the Jeremy Brent Sherlock Holmes, but it was definitely something like in the like I think like in the 70s or whatever that they were doing that might have been earlier. There was like something like the Sherlock Holmes film, and they had something out on the lake and it sunk it, and it was something that was massive, and that's something that they found with the sonar detection that was down.
It could be that the monster was there right before because it was living there and left when they were coming because they were loud. Look, when you eliminate the impossible, whatever's left, however improbable, must be the truth, right? So it's impossible. Let's get back to let's get back to the loch. Okay, so it's really hard to do like scans and things of it, and but because of this, like remember we talked about liminal spaces. You're looking out over these gray, dark things in this remarkable sort of glen they call it. There's lots of biodiversity in the water and around it. You've got stories of this place that go back before, and we'll go back to that. But first, let's talk about a little feature on the southern end of the lake of the loch called Boleskine House. Boleskine House. So Boleskine House was at one point a parish, a kirk, a Scottish word for church, was built on that location. And according to stories, the congregation was locked inside the church at some point, and the church burned down, killing everybody in it. Later, it is a but before it burns down, before this burns down, there's a story of and the word they use is wizard. That so there was a church, a kirk, and a graveyard, and there was allegedly there's a story of a wizard that raised the dead of the graveyard, and the parish priest had to painstakingly return all of the awakened corpses. We might call them zombies or animated dead or walking dead or something like that. Had to return them all to the graveyard, and in time for Sunday church too. Can you imagine? You think you've had a bad week? So there's this story. And then later on, the church burns down with everybody in it, according to legend or story.
So the wizard burnt the church down? Is that what...
Or all those guys were like, do you know how long it took us to raise from the dead? After you guys burn it down. So we've got that. And then later it is a hunting lodge is built in that location. And I believe the hunting lodge itself, if I'm not mistaken, and if I am, you know what I'm going to say, people. Put it in the comments. Help us out. The hunting lodge itself becomes what would then be called Boleskine House. Now, Boleskine House, so in recent years, in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, there's a big fire at Boleskine House. You catching a theme here? And they've been in the midst of restoring it back to what it was like somewhere around the year 1899. Why is that? I'm glad you asked, because that is the year that none other than Aleister Crowley moves into Boleskine House. Aleister Crowley, sometimes called the wickedest man in the world, also referred to as the man we would like to hang. I believe that was the people of Sicily that might have termed him that. But anyway. He was a notorious 19th and early 20th century ritual magician who got kicked out of a bunch of countries in Europe by being a controversial pain in the ass and doing things that just upset people of well, look, 1870s. Is that post-Victorian, I guess? What is that? What is the...
No, I think you're still...
Might still be Victorian or late Victorian or something.
Yeah.
Well, whatever it was, they were more uptight than they are now, than we are now. Some of us. And so Aleister Crowley, famous, something of a provocateur, mostly among occultists, but just in general, he likes being the center of attention. And he was doing this working. He had inherited a bunch of money, and he decides at this point that he is going to undertake what's called, it's the I used to call it the Abramelin operation because I learned about this stuff before the internet was around and you could get consensus on how people were saying things. Some people say Abramelin. I'm probably just going to say Abramelin because I'm just going to fall back into that. So the Abramelin operation is this thing where basically you do a 6 month later on a more complete version of the Abramelin operation surfaced. It's an old grimoire, an old magic book that leads you to what is called the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, which sounds very white light right now, but actually angels are kind of freaky things when you actually look at like biblical angels and angel magic and stuff like that. So we won't get into that. But too much of a tangent. So
That's a different.
that's a whole different world. Well, it's a tangentially and slightly overlapping world. But the HGA or the Holy Guardian Angel it's the end goal of this thing, and basically you are going to summon up the what I believe in the Abramelin, the Book of Abramelin, are referred to as the four princes of hell, and then they've got the dukes, which are under them. And so basically you summon the princes of hell, you get them to, Bill, get your dukes in line in the name of all these weird god names and blah, blah, blah. And with the help of my HGA, who's going to sort of beat you into submission or intimidate you. And so, yeah, you've got, and basically the idea is that you summon up all these demons and then you bind them all so that they can't have a negative effect on your life anymore. And so that's what he's doing in this place. Now, the beginning of the operation is mostly just prayer. But in his book, Confessions of Aleister Crowley, which is a painful read. I like Crowley, after it says, but like, it's painful. It's mountain climbing and chess and poetry and, it's, where are the demons? So he starts this operation. His sidekick and teacher of the Golden Dawn gets into some controversy in Paris. He gets pulled out in the middle of this big, intense ritual that you're not supposed to interrupt. It's like 6 months long. Like that. It looks like it's actually supposed to be about 18 months long. He gets pulled out of it and goes to Paris to defend his lodge master or whatever who's embroiled in this controversy with this magical lodge. Terrible idea. He should have just stayed there, but whatever. A little late Monday morning quarterbacking here. So he eventually allegedly does complete the operation in reportedly in 1906 in China on some adventure he's on in China with his folks. So but while he's in Boleskine House, he's reporting these things as he's doing like the prayers and things like that. And he feels like he's stirred up these untamed spirits of the place. He's not necessarily saying, because in the beginning of this, you're not summoning demons and things like that. And apparently before he did this operation, he wasn't really in like the summoning game. He was more in like the theory kind of game. So he wasn't really doing this kind of stuff, but he reports paranormal activity in this in this house, poltergeist phenomena. He reports that it's getting darker in there. And not only that, it's got an oppressive feel, but it's getting visibly darker. Like it's harder to see things in this place. And so he eventually runs off to Paris to meet up with Marshall McGregor Mathers, if I'm not mistaken, and to have a word fight with a bunch of lodge people, and then doesn't wrap up the ritual in time. Now, curiously, 2 years before he gets his HGA thing wrapped up in China, he has what is known as the reception of the Book of the Law in Egypt, in this sort of wild tale that I probably won't jump into now. But it's funny because it's like he's not really summoning things. He has this major event that's like the central thing of his magical career in Egypt, and then 2 years later he completes the HGA thing. But meanwhile, he leaves this haunted house in the Boleskine House, which already like that. It already had like a weird kind of background history. And then you've also got Jimmy Page. Am I getting the right one? I think it
Yeah,
was
Jimmy
Jimmy
Page
Page.
bought it as part of his Aleister Crowley collection.
Yeah, yeah. So in
Of Led Zeppelin. Like
Zeppelin
if
is a delightful historic phenomena.
but there's but yeah, but Led Zeppelin, I'm pretty sure, did not do any recording or anything there. That was kind of it was just part of Jimmy Page's like interest in the occult, and this was like a collectible item, like because when you're a rock star, I guess, and you can buy
collect famous
haunted
houses.
mansions. Yeah, based on because you were a fan of like the occult, I guess. It's
Yeah.
just like, if you're an actor and you like cars, you buy a lot of, you might buy some famous cars or something.
Yeah, and otherwise you buy the Boleskine House.
Yeah, yeah.
The Amityville Mansion and like all the kinds of weird. Yeah. So yeah, so that is, I think that's probably what I'll say about Aleister Crowley for the time being. That's
It does kind of, when you talk about this ritual, it does kind of sound like it's like the sort of like a really bizarre, like ritual magic version of like self-help. Like, I'm gonna bind all my demons and get my.
Well, and the funny thing, so
but in the weirdest kind of way.
in like the 19, I'm gonna say like the 1960s, 1970s, and really it was like a little before then, but like there's this established trend of trying to couch everything occult in psychological terms so it could be respectable. Occultists, it will never be respectable. Stop doing that. Stop it. Stop it with quantum physics. Stop it with the planes. Stop it. Anyway, done. But they want to couch it in these psychological terms. So it lead very much into depth psychology has its place in all this magic and stuff. But when it comes down to just explaining everything away as like, oh yeah, well I mean even Crowley referred to them in his later years as being aspects of the human consciousness. But it's not really clear that he actually what he thought these things were. He has contradictory statements on a lot of things. But yeah, it's kind of strange. It's like this weird kind of thing of like objectifying things and then binding them using some symbol that has authority to you. And that someone could claim that that's what's happening. That doesn't usually result in poltergeist phenomena, but some could also claim that he was lying when it wasn't getting darker and there weren't poltergeist phenomena. But it's cool.
Or they were already there. He was just,
Yeah.
messing with.
Yeah, well, exactly. They're like, why'd you put this thing on the wall for? This thing's hideous.
So after he went to Egypt, he went to, I think he said Paris. I don't remember the order in which it is. I think, did you even say China? It doesn't matter. After he
Paris,
left,
Egypt, China. Yeah, in those things. Yeah.
did he come back to the house
I
or?
don't think he does. I think he just kind of sells it. Nope. Never went back.
Just
Never went back. He's like, I'm not going to that place. It's freaky. It's got things crawling around in there. I'm just trying to travel around having illicit consensual experiences and altered state experiences. I'm not really
So what's
Yeah,
the next what's the next step for Loch Ness? So he leaves.
So
the
he
house
leaves.
is still there.
House is still there. Jimmy Page gets it. Well, let's see. So he left in 1902. Who was the next owner? I don't know. I had Jimmy Page as my next single. I don't think it was unowned from 1902 to
someone's got to be paying
1970s.
taxes.
Went
on
into foreclosure.
Yeah.
Could not be sold.
All right, here we
It
go.
was owned by Connor McLeod. I'm
right,
sorry, he
so-
changed his name on that.
There's like a gap. There's like a gap history here. Like it's like, what's going on here?
The poltergeists are just like, it's kind of got a like a Shining kind of vibe. Just the ghosts are just running the joint.
Okay, so he sells it in 1913. So he probably owned it and it just sat vacant for that time. It passes through a few hands, doesn't mention who. And I know a lot of the owners actually wanted to be like kind of secretive about the thing because you got all these weird people creeping around the house, and it's yeah, let's see. It goes so there's a list of them, but it's really until it goes to Jimmy Page that it's not really too interesting after that. And then a little ways later, a Dutch couple. This is 2002. It was being used as a holiday home. It was severely damaged by a fire in December of 2015. And now it's owned by the Boleskine House Foundation, which is kind of appropriate depending on how bad the fire damage was. But yeah, so I mean, I think that's kind of like there are like local reportings of like ghosty things around it, but I think it's really, I think that's pretty, but a lot of the things around Loch Ness, some people are like, oh, well, this is because in the late 1800s, here's this guy, Aleister Crowley, that buys this thing and summons a bunch of demons in it, which is not entirely accurate. And then they're all around because he never wrapped up his business. But the funny thing is that because it had an association with magic already, this is kind of like a weird thing about that property. Now, Loch Ness itself has a long history of belief in kelpies. Kelpies are shape-shifting aquatic water horse things of Scottish lore. And the folks that lived in this area, I believe, were referred to the Picts, I believe, Picts. And so it's like when you go back to, I'm looking at Columba times now. Okay, so I'm looking at like 500, 600 CE, that kind of realm. But these stories seem to predate that. The stories of kelpies. And kelpies are water horses that can shapeshift and they drown you. They lead you to the water and they drown you. And so horses, long-necked things, living in Loch Ness. So actually, there are some people that say the thing they're calling the Loch Ness Monster, it's kelpies. Kelpies sometimes appear in the form of a handsome man to try to lure young women, in the form of a beautiful woman to lure young men. I don't have to be 18th century about this or anything, to lure appropriate people who might find attractive women and men to be attractive, to repeat myself. And then finally, sometimes in the form of a giant hairy man who smashes people going by it. Sound familiar? Just saying,
So it's
associated with poltergeists,
the concept of the kelpies, it reminds me of sirens and this whole idea where it's basically like, hey, people, pay attention. You're going to wreck your ship. Hey, people, stay away from this water. You might end yourself. Be careful.
Yeah. The word monster, the etymology of the word monster actually derives from the word warning. So you're not too far off. And I mean, it might also have been that like if monsters are showing up, it's a warning that you are out of sync with I don't know, whatever the equivalent of the divine plan would have been at that time that word came into existence.
We can also
with the
talk
stars.
about, since you kind of mentioned earlier, to add into our long-running list of liminal space in like Highland Scottish ritual like beliefs, like there's like the three, like I guess like I don't know if it's like I don't want to say three spheres or whatever, but you have like the earth, the water, like the air, and they're associated, and like so water is like the air is like the above like kind of spiritual realm.
Yeah.
Earth is where you occupy, and the water is like the in-between realm. And in places like already around Loch Ness and stuff, there's already like burial grounds and like all kinds of like things that were all like there too before. And from what I said too, it's very like flat and reflective, too. So like you see the sky largely reflected in it, and it's like there's this kind of like potentially like ritual, you know, at least, or like spiritual connection to that like the water is like the kind of bridge between, you know,
Yeah.
the like the other realm sort of, you know. So there's that kind of
Yeah.
like, you know, at least in that sort of tradition, which would make sense why monsters could come out of it, I guess, or try to drag you into it, you know. So,
Yeah.
so
Summoning monsters 101. Liminal space required.
yes,
Um,
find a really big
you can't
scrying
find
mirror.
one, you make
If
one
you
instead.
yeah.
Exactly.
it's a
Oh man, yeah. So I'm gonna go on so many tangents, but I won't. I'm getting better, believe it or not. Do you believe it? So
down in the do believe.
down in the thing, write us a letter. Where will we go? Why don't you guys start talking? I'm sure if people are still on here, they're tired of hearing me. Huh? What do you think? You all go fishing?
So real quick, these are kind of tangentially related. I have this list in front of me. We have, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of all of these because see previous episode. We have similar type creatures in Okanagan Lake in Canada. We have Lake Champlain.
Yeah.
We have Lake Akita in Japan. We have Lake Brosno in Russia. We have Lake Tiannachi in China / North Korea. And we have Lake in Iceland. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that one. Sorry.
I can give it a crack. I'm pretty good at this.
I'm also good at messing up those terms.
So I don't know anything about these other lakes as far as the eeriness, as far as the depth of the lakes, you know, the darkness. I don't know if there are any comparative features, but those are about a half dozen that I came across that have similar monster type things. And this list, we have the I don't know what the Ogopogo is. Champ is like a Nessie kind of thing.
Yeah.
The Ishikunkun in Japan, I don't know what that is. Brosno is more like a dragon kind of thing.
Okay.
The Lake Tiannachi monster, I don't know what that is, but the one in Iceland is more like a worm.
Okay.
But I don't know if you're in your research, if you came across any of these, or if anyone can or wants to elaborate. But that's what I got.
Yeah. I did not. I did come across, and I decided not to go down that because I figured it'd be hard enough to rein in already. I did encounter this notion of these recurring lake monster things. There's actually one right near Loch Ness called Loch Morar, I believe. Morar. And the creature that is reported to be in there is called the Morag. And it's, and I believe it's alleged to be similar. In fact, one of the big researchers of Loch Ness, who I think is more in the debunking part, because that's usually what they're doing anyway. And he built a submersible, a little submarine back in, I want to say again, probably like in like the 70s or so, to do an analysis of that. And he did not find a monster there, but you know, I think it was just kind of his testing ground, and then you know, make sure the submersible will work until you get near the real monster, because it'll, you know, like I said.
Something interesting about the weird 30s, like 1930s with like the different pictures and the things like that, and the Loch Ness Monster changing from this kind of like possibly historic and mythological kind of creature thing to like it's like a dinosaur. Also sort of coincides with like the release of King Kong and the popularity of like the depiction of the long neck dinosaur. You know, it's like, so there's so that's kind of a thing that seems like as well, you know,
The
like,
popular consciousness
yeah, like it's kind
possible
of like,
contamination.
and I do want to throw out that I like that I kept coming across that like one of the possibilities was like sea otters, just because I think sea otters are kind of funny. And it was like it was like the story of a guy who's like on a motorcycle and he was at night, very similar to like our Mothman story. He sees this thing out, whatever, like he probably was far away from it. It was probably like an otter, you know, and also otters can swim in packs and they seem like put like ripples through the water, you know, it's like that kind of makes sense. And it's just like, and it made me think of like the Mothman thing about like maybe it's like like two owls in a trench coat. Maybe it's a bunch of sea otter. like,
I know very little about sea otters, but I do remember that Loch Ness is fresh water. Do sea otters live in fresh water?
yeah, well, yeah, or various, yeah, like otter. Yeah, they do. Like they're,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
so it's apparently there's a population in there. So,
And dinosaurs do not. At least plesiosaurs did not live in fresh water. So here comes the thing. So the leading theory in the mid 20th century was that it was a plesiosaur, a surviving member of a long thought extinct species of dinosaur, thought to be extinct something like 66 million years ago. It would not be the first time that we encountered something we thought was extinct. Far from it. But the one that comes to mind when it comes to sea creatures is the coelacanth, a prehistoric fish thought to be extinct something like 80 million years ago, and was discovered again in the, I just call it everything that happened in the 20th century, mid 20th century, in the mid 20th century, or the 1970s, in Japan, in the waters off of Japan, if I'm not mistaken. And so, and now, I don't know if they're more common now. You know, if there's, can you go and get your coelacanth steak at your most expensive local restaurant? Probably not.
yeah,
But,
I think coelacanth. The thing is, like they have to be fairly deep underwater, and it was just kind of happenstance that they caught this one in a fishing net or whatever. Like they're usually like, I guess, you know, it's, you're not, they're like, because I think that was like the problem is like once they came up to the higher depth, they will like, or up from the lower depth to, you know, shallower water, they'll die. Like, so it's like hard to, you can't keep them alive in like an aquarium or something for study. I'm pretty sure.
All right.
So it's like something to do. Yeah. Because just, you know, just
Well,
like we can't go to lower depths. I guess certain
we
like
can
sea
make
monsters
AI
can't-
Jesus though. Can't somebody catch me a coelacanth? I want to
You
see
can
what
make
it's like.
AI coelacanth. I mean,
Can you eat it?
yeah.
Can you bite?
No, but you can make AI
Sorry.
you eat AI. So,
Oh man.
uh,
Yeah, I guess that's as good as it gets for now. All right. So probably not a plesiosaur. Also, the lake does the loch does not. I think it's the word for lake. It doesn't support. It doesn't have the food supply to support something like that.
I was thinking the same thing because just you know, recently the Bigfoot episode is, you know, so very fresh in my head, and remembering how much food a Bigfoot would need, how much land it would need.
Yeah.
My mind immediately jumped to how much food this thing would need. 'Cause I don't even know how big it's supposed to be, like 20 feet long or something ridiculous like that. Does anyone
Something
know?
like that. Yeah. Not offhand. Once I found
No
out,
one's measured it, so we can make up what it's 60 feet long and 300 feet
it's
tall.
seven and a half.
what's the
Mothman
size of a
wingspan.
plesiosaur? How many sea otters makes a plesiosaur? That's
I'm going to ask that exactly. How many sea otters would it take in a row to equal the length of a plesiosaur?
AI, solve this mathematical equation
This is
for
what
me.
this is what we're doing with this. Before it comes and kills us all, this is
well, this might also destroy it accidentally. You know, these kinds of questions.
it would take approximately 3 sea otters.
That's
Guys,
that's
that's
perfectly
not right.
acceptable.
That is
That's
not-
perfectly acceptable amount to put in a trench coat to make a plesiosaur.
All right, so a sea otter is approximately 1.2 meters.
Okay.
Okay, so that is
5 feet, I think, ballpark.
5 feet.
Yeah, well, their tail to yeah. Okay.
And a plesiosaur apparently is only 3 to 5 meters. That's tiny.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to I thought these. Okay,
That
so
can't
that's
be
like 25 or 15 feet.
Yeah, so like basically like a little shy of a school bus, you know, I guess, or a bus. Yeah, that's like a little.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I guess maybe it could be a plesiosaur if they're that small.
I mean, maybe they don't eat that much. They have very small heads. You remember the deep thoughts that laid out the science with this? That science should create a dog with a small head, but a very large body. This way, it would still be a guard dog, but it wouldn't eat that much. Solid reasoning. Solid reasoning.
Uh,
All right.
Where do we go from here?
All right. So, it could be a freshwater plesiosaur. So we've got.
Maybe it's just an alligator, like, or a crocodile that got flushed down a, and into the loch.
We're still working on that theory. Yeah.
Alligators in the sewer. That's a.
If you buy plesiosaurs, don't release them into freshwater lakes.
Definitely don't flush
Messes
them
up the
down your
ecosystem
toilet,
and it confuses the scientists. Find the thing.
Okay, boss.
Okay, so giant eels. Giant eels are another suspect. And in
Are they
recent-
screaming eels?
the shrieking
eels.
eels.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got the giant eels as a possibility. Although, once again, going back to food supply, it is argued that there isn't enough for them to eat there. So it could not sustain. Because you don't just have one, right? You have to have like a small enough population that it's reproducing. And it has to also account for some of them are not going to get to reproduce, even though presumably it would be the top predator. So, yeah, giant eels are another possibility. Now they did a DNA analysis of the lake by taking samples from like 25 or whatever different locations in Loch Ness to see what kinds of creatures they could detect in there. And no weird ones came up except for eels. Now, giant eels and normal size eels would be essentially, I'm not going to say the same DNA, but essentially the same, unless you're really diving deep, pardon the pun, in the DNA world, then like it's going to be incredibly similar. And so it doesn't seem like the scientific evidence has turned up proof that that there is a monster living in there. And it also is hard to disprove because of the unique acoustics and the depth and just the size of the damn thing. And like, well, what if there's a way in and out of it that they don't know about yet? I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's been entirely mapped. They just found out relatively recently that it was as deep as 812 feet. And so
80 stories.
Thank you. But that does remind me of something else, yes, that we talked about recently, and I mentioned already, and the population of interdimensionally traveling entities that are a possibility, and the possibility of something that seems to be an animal that is actually something paranormal, that is something like, all right, I'll just throw it out there like this. What if the Loch Ness Monster is a ghost? Or what if the Loch Ness Monster is a kelpie it's not a creature that lives in the water? Because we don't know about shape-shifting creatures. That's like a paranormal thing. We might talk about werewolves at some point. What if it's that? And people are seeing it because they're gazing across this liminal space in these weird things, and it's messing with their psychic stuff, and they're tapping into all these weird ideas and this weird because it's not necessarily that a monster had to really be there so much as what if the human mind, I'm throwing all kinds of things out there, what if the human mind is capable of creating paranormal phenomena when it organizes over time in a similar location or a similar,
And that's one thing I read about, was that the possibility that it's just a tulpa, not just, but it's a tulpa. Same
right?
idea.
Yeah, it's like some kind of a thought form or a human built entity that has some degree of independent existence separate from the individual people that feed into it. So the idea is like you might have people in the year 600 that are feeding into it. Like, sure, they die off, but then there are other people that are there that are continuing to feed into this kind of thing, you know? And that it doesn't really need a food supply like that. And if it's the equivalent of a mass hallucination, well, we might look at something like what was it, the Our Lady of Fatima? But nobody asked whether there was a food supply for a 75-foot tall Mary.
Well, maybe someone should ask that question.
That's 7 tall.
She's as tall as Loch Ness is deep, damn it. What if the monster is a paranormal phenomena? Making myself lightheaded with all this. I might start seeing things here.
But there's something also like that's like always like, you know, when a like local thing stays persistent, you know, I think like having a good local monster is fun. It's like, but there's like, I think if Loch Ness were like a sunny beach resort, we wouldn't be talking about a Loch Ness. But the fact that like the lake is like very cold, it's not like you're not going to go and swimming in it at pretty much any time of year because you'll get like hypothermia. Like it's really, if you want to be a diver going into it, you have to be an experienced diver. And why is that? Like, why are you that interested in it? There's probably other places you could go and dive. Yeah, like boating can get rough. You know, it's like there's like it's mostly like good to observe things from the shore or stay on. You know, it's not like there's a lot of like decent fishing, I guess. Like you know. It's like there's plenty of other places again to go that are things, and there's even other lochs that are much nicer that you can go and swim in and stuff. So it's like that kind of keeps it from, you know, that whole like, oh, it's harder to explore, and therefore it's harder to, you know, it keeps the myth alive a little more, you know. Whereas it's like, you know, if it was like, well, people are always going swimming in there and diving their submarines in there, and you know, nothing's there. You know, it's like, so I think that certainly helps. It's kind of already sort of dangerous area, and dangerous in other respects of, like you said, like it's been a kind of hotbed for occulty type things or ancient ritual type things, and there's some that gives it adds on like that other extra layer that, you know, a lot of other, not every place gets to have. Like, you know, no one's going around being like, oh, well, you know, down in like, you know, the Cape May or something, the Delaware Bay, there's all this ritual magic going on. You know, it's like you know,
Let's do it.
It's like then we could have killed him with our own monster, you know. but yeah, so I kind of feel like that helps keep it, you know, like keep the thing alive, you know, so to speak.
One thing I thought was interesting, and I don't know enough about human, can I say migration? Does that make sense? Where humans traveled, you know, or, you know, throughout the world. But I thought it was interesting that the lake I mentioned in Russia and the one in Japan and Iceland, okay, they are all between ballpark 1200 to 1400. So it's like the same, like within that time frame, you know, you had 3 very different parts of the world reporting a very similar kind of thing. I thought that was kind of cool, kind of interesting.
Is that the beginning of the so-called Age of Enlightenment?
1200? No.
Was it?
No, that was later.
No, it's like
this is medieval.
looking like
What took them so long?
to like
1685.
1600s. Yeah, I was gonna say it's like post Newton, you know.
It was like 3 weeks ago.
Meh.
And so many are still unenlightened.
That's when they forgot everything about monsters. The easy explanation, I guess, would be like, well, it was when people were still stupid. They're not anymore, and they believed in these things. But I don't know. I think that's a terrible explanation because, first of all, I don't think people were much less intelligent than they are right now. They just had different frames of reference for, well, they did different criteria for what they considered real or legitimate. But I don't know, like, sailors have stories of all kinds of weird things, right? Is it just because they're out in the water.
The sea
Freaking-
does kind of make you mad. And I think
Yeah.
like, I mean, like, I think it's hard to conceive. Okay, so just the other night I was taking a ferry ride. Like I was just why I was thinking of Cape
Yeah.
May. I was coming home, and because of like snowstorms and things like that, I had to take a delayed ferry, and it's basically from Cape May into Delaware, like Cape May, New Jersey to Lewis, Delaware. So you cross over the Delaware Bay, and it was choppy as hell, and it's like nighttime, and this like ferry is like it's like rocking and stuff like that. Delaware Bay is not far out. You're not in the ocean, but like at a certain point, things are just lights and stuff on the horizon, and that's all you see. And because it's like nighttime, the only thing I can see is like occasionally a light going by or a light on the horizon that would go like this, up and down and up, because it was like it was rocking it hard enough that things were falling in the like commissary and stuff like that. It wasn't so it was pretty and cold, very cold. So it's like I can't imagine like just being like a in the early age of exploration, kind of sailing. You have some ideas and concepts like that you've worked out for quite some time. Like of how to navigate by the stars and things like that. It's just like, but you're still just going. You're just out there. Like there's nothing like, for a long time. Like, and even if it's like, oh well, it only took us a month to. That's a long time. Or even if you like said, oh well, we bumped along, like we went from like say like to get to the like like the Vikings traveling across into Canada, they bumped along like Greenland, Iceland, and blah blah, came down and over. That's still a lot to be on just a boat. Even if you get to stop, like even if it's like days on a boat, like where nothing's around and you're like rowing and or sailing, like that's a lot. I think it's enough to you got probably make you a little like odd,
So here's a fun idea. Okay, so talking about sailors and stories. What if there are just stories to pass the time? Like you're out at sea for a month. Man, guys, gotta watch that sea serpent. Gotta make sure, gotta pay attention, gotta make sure it doesn't get us, I thought I saw it. No, it's okay. It's just an otter. We're good.
What about fishermen that aren't out to sea for long?
Talk to me.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, so, all right, so.
I mean, ones that just come out and back, they're just like.
Okay, so for instance, if you go to like beginning of the Common Era, fishing in the Mediterranean. Like you're not going out for days. You're going out probably very early and probably coming back like late afternoon or something like that. But like, so I wonder if those stories, I mean, now the story of the Leviathan is from the Mediterranean. And that also does not have whales or anything that big in it. And in fact, so people are familiar with the story of Jonah and the whale. It's not a whale, it's the Leviathan, which is a creature God created to sport and play in the waves. Like it's a really weird mention in the Bible.
It's a pet.
Yeah, it's his pet. It's like
God's favorite pet.
And it might be more like a dragon than it is like a whale. But people just say, oh, it was probably a whale because that'd be big enough to swallow a person. You got to read this thing more closely. There's some really weird stuff in this collection of books. The Bible, But yeah, so, but what about that story?
Well, I guess the Mediterranean seemingly can get pretty rough. I mean, wasn't there a whole, Odyssey that seemed to have story-wise? And that was just getting around the Mediterranean a little bit.
Was that just the Mediterranean? I never knew where Troy was supposed to be. I read the Odyssey. I just never.
Yeah,
really read
it's all within like the Greek, region, which is just in the Mediterranean.
Well, if you got Cyclops and gods and things effing with you, yeah, it will take you 10 years to get
and
that.
sirens like the
And sirens. Yeah.
Which Laurie gets here again. Laurie, people to their doom.
Yeah, so like these are like folks that aren't like going out for necessarily. I mean, in that case, it was a long period because they were going out to war, But yeah, I wonder, and that might be something that requires more exploration, just to see about sailor stories and pirate stories and things. Because I'm gonna
Well, there was this
compare it to
old
something
man,
that.
and then there was this.
Oh
Also
no! I killed
be
an
curious
albatross and everybody died. I forget who summarized it like that. That was so good. Though.
So talking about the ocean as liminal space and the concept of the liminal space where the lock is, I think it'd be very interesting if you heard stories, and this I'm fairly certain this doesn't happen very often, that people in the desert, what kinds of things, there are stories that come out of that, like the sand monster or like the sandworm,
genie,
Jinn?
yeah, it's like and like which are not like the wish granting fun
They're
things.
not
but, like,
nice.
No, they're not.
They
No,
don't
no, no.
like you.
Yeah.
They
Or, like-
dislike you.
or just like the desert, like the stereotypical desert hallucination, or like the oasis that isn't real, or like the upside down
Yeah.
city in the sky, or things like that. That usually comes
yeah.
down from like the desert, like
Have you ever seen photos of those?
No.
They're really, I forgot there's a term for it, really, really cool, where it looks like looking out at the ocean, you see like a ship that's like actually, it looks like it's floating, but it's actually, it's really cool, really cool. If you got a chance, check it out.
Yeah. The cover-up story is officially that it has to do with the refraction of light and the way it plays with your own ability to perceive it.
But that's a
But
cover.
we all know that's not true. Because then how would you explain those cities up there? So anyway,
So you have the Jinn. Are there any other like desert monsters?
There's gotta be. I'm sure there are.
I'm sure there are because so there must be, and because like the wilderness itself just seems to be a place where so I'm gonna back up for a second. I'll talk about sailors are like really, really good at reading the signs around them, right? And I just mean the waves are doing something, the sky is doing something, the clouds are doing something, the position of the stars, all that stuff is being taken into account. They get like really, really good at it. And it's like not that hard to have a disaster. So it's like, you really have to be paying attention, I imagine, particularly gone back, Another group of people that often they're often the people that spot a paranormal event, possibly paranormal event in the woods. And that paranormal event is called Bigfoot. And those people are called hunters, who are actually like used to sitting in a deer stand and staring for hours and like eating something that doesn't smell like anything, I guess. So you don't alert the things you're trying to, I mean, like sitting for hours, staring out. And most of them never see Bigfoot. But some of them do, and they'll like swear by it. And there's actually like here I go. There's actually some convincing stuff out there. It's gonna be less convincing now and going forward because it's a video. You guys remember Predator, the movie Predator?
Yes.
And when Predator moves around, speaking of Arnold, sorry, Arnold, I wasn't trying to impersonate you earlier. When the Predator moves and it's cloaked, it's like it warps space, right? So there's this lady. You probably Google this and it'll come, or I'll get the link to our organizer. There's this lady that has this video footage of this weird warping of space while they're sitting there filming, looking for weird stuff to happen. But this warping of, like, it looks like that. Like, it looks like it's like something invisible came through and messed up the light waves or something somehow. And it's like, well, what was that? I mean,
Are you saying
again,
Bigfoot is just the predator? Is that?
I don't know if I hope that or don't hope that. I don't hope that. I hope Bigfoot's more like Harry and the Hendersons. But no, I think Bigfoot's more like the boogeyman. Popping in and out, and probably not all the same thing either. But
I'm picturing big trees with doors. It just kind of like walks in one, walks out another.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you were in here. That's the wood knocking, is the slamming doors. Oh man, so let's talk about Nessie and Loch Ness itself. We didn't come up with a little game for the end of this. We must start doing that. We talked about like a random draw card or rolling a die or something like that. But you're most likely explanation for a I'll give you two. Most likely explanations for what Nessie is, and followed by your monster rating. Would you want to encounter?
So are we getting rid of all the? We're taking all the occult weird aspects out of the
Nope.
Loch Ness.
If that's your best explanation, then that's the one you should
okay.
use.
Oh, no, okay. It's just I'm saying.
And in fact, I will charge through that door, that
All right.
the idiotic door. I will charge through it and say, I think Nessie is a spirit. I think it is a spiritual phenomena. I think it is either a psychic experience of people gazing out over a liminal space and seeing something in the distant past, or it is a straight up thought form, or Dan, you had mentioned the notion of like a tulpa, or like a something that people have fed into and created this thing. Those are much more likely than people are just full of it. And also, if I have to go with a physical explanation, I'll break my own rule. It's sea otters riding on a plesiosaur. Taking it back to salt water before something bad happens. All right. I don't want to encounter any of these things, I don't think. In fact, Loch Ness does not sound like my place to be. I do want to visit Boleskine House. Okay, so that's as good. So Boleskine House, I'll give 3 monsters.
When do they get restored?
I want to go
Is
there
that
anyway.
Restoration done? Can you tour it yet?
2026, I believe, is when it's supposed to be opening up again.
Well, that sounds good. So
So if we're still welcome anywhere else in the world,
we haven't alienated everybody.
We haven't alienated everybody.
Pronunciations.
or by our stupid, just what stupid things could we alienate
Here,
people with?
I'll save it on the thing of the thing. So yeah, I think I'll go with the explanation. I was gonna say sea otters hanging out with eels. That was but so I was like, but yeah, I'm not and I don't think since no one's ever been attacked by Nessie and stuff like that, it doesn't sound like it's that scary. Loch Ness itself does sound scary in the sense of like it just seems like a dangerous place, like in like there's a lot of places in like the Highlands that are kind of dangerous, like you fall in a bog and die or something. You know, I mean, there does seem to be like a dangerousness to it, but so I'll give the whole thing I'll give it a 3 too, because I also do like I really do like a local monster, and I think Loch Ness probably needs the tourism, you know, and it probably deserves it, you know. So it's like whether you're going to visit the restored creepy house or you're going to try to see the Loch Ness Monster, just don't go swimming, obviously, and you know, and throw some tourist money at Loch Ness, because it probably needs it, and I don't know. So that's my So 3, give it a solid 3.
All right, Dan.
So for me, okay, so there was a TV show probably started about 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, called How I Met Your Mother. And there's this one episode where they're talking about each other's the bad habits that they kind of blocked out. They didn't really notice them. You know, we all have bad habits, and we just don't notice them. And in this particular episode, they are pointing them out. It's like, oh yeah, you do that. That is annoying, that kind of a thing. And that when it happens, when they have that moment of realization, there's like the sound of a glass shattering, like that aha moment almost. And for me, during our chat today, that happened when I realized just how small a plesiosaurus is. I really thought they were larger, and when I saw it was only like ballpark 15 feet, 1.5 stories, you know, it was just like, no. To see something like that far away, and it has to be around 15 feet tall. I mean, it's going to be small, and it could be really anything. For me, no, I think this is 100%. People are misidentifying things, whether it's a log, whether it's an eel, whether it's sea otters, whether it's Bigfoot, you know. But I don't think Nessie's a thing. I would give this a 1. I think it's nothing to it. That's the most likely. The most unlikely, I kind of like the idea of, and this is tied. I like the idea of either a tulpa or the ghost of a plesiosaurus. I think both those ideas are kind of fun to play with.
Yeah.
But most likely, I think no, they're just people want to see something, and it's just their eyes playing tricks on them.
And of course, these two are wrong. You should definitely also go to Loch Ness and buy their stuff, especially the plesiosaur stuff. So yeah, so well, but Dan, how about Boleskine House, the haunted, once burned down church, zombie graveyard, Aleister Crowley, demon house, Jimmy Page, rock star, illicit substance house.
You're just like dropping names now, you know.
You scared of Jimmy Page? Maybe you should be.
He has that double neck guitar. He's definitely like 80 years old.
I like a good haunted house. I would love to check that out. That would be fun.
Yeah.
I haven't heard much about it aside from what you were. Actually, let me rephrase that. I know nothing about it aside from what you were talking about earlier. So I don't know if anything still happens today, allegedly or not. But I think that'd be cool. I'm always game for seeing weird stuff. So
If you're a rock star considering buying Boleskine House, buy it from me. You have the money. I don't have the money. This is all I have. This is as close as it gets for me. So,
okay, this could be the fun game. Okay, so we talked about you know, actors, you know, very wealthy and buying things to collect them just to collect them, whether it's cars,
Right.
you know, or housing,
Right.
whatever. So given a large sum of money, you win the Powerball tomorrow or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Powerball, for everyone that's, you know, not familiar with it, is a very large lottery. Starts at 20 million USD. As of this recording, it's up over $1 billion. And this is, you know, $2025. You know, the year. You know, that's the kind of dollars we're talking about here. So you win this Powerball. You have a ton of money. What is something that you're going to buy an obscene amount of? Go.
I'm trying to think of something fun, like something funny. Because usually it'd probably just be like art or something like that. You know, but it's just like, yeah. So, I definitely wouldn't buy a haunted house. That's for certain.
well, good. Then we don't have to compete.
Yeah, I'll send that for Chris.
I'll outbid you.
Land, like I don't know.
Yeah.
like some a boat. So I could go out to sea and see all these weird things.
Stare out and see if it really does. Just
Destroy my mind.
crazy.
Maybe we'd have to fund the Kickstarter for that seance play. Maybe that's what we'd have to do.
Yeah. Well, I, for my money, it's hard to find a better thing to buy than a bunch of haunted houses. Maybe haunted churches. I always wanted to live in a church, like Ween. Didn't they live in a church? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think they're cool. I mean, I wouldn't leave it like that. Maybe I would. I don't know. Phantom of the Opera style. Just the choir love it.
You're just in there all the time. Like it's like this guy, the previous owner still lives here, but you actually do still live there.
Yeah, I definitely buy haunted things. I probably haunted houses because they're. Yeah, I think that's kind of good. Starting with Boleskine House.
I'm picturing the TV series Friday the 13th. They had like that magic shop or whatever, cursed items.
And it had nothing to do with that. This
Yeah, I
movie.
think it was just like supposed to be a different show, and they just used that to sell the. I think about that show way more often than you probably should.
So okay, there was this one episode where the guy has like I think it's like a cursed Corvette or something like that, and he wears the key on like a string around his neck or something like that. And I think he ends up dying, but gets like impaled by like the car crashes and impales him, I think is what happens. I could be wrong. Fact checkers, you know, comments.
Yeah.
But when I go to work, I have my ID I throw on, and then I have my office key I also throw on. And every time I like get in the car, I think about that.
That's yeah, that series. I was always trying to figure out how it connected, and it's just like, well, Friday the 13th is just a thing on its own. The real question is, why the hell did they name
Friday the 13th?
basic
Friday the 13th.
series Friday the 13th?
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe one of the
Had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, did the first one? I'm trying to think where the one that made sense right before it went all crazy was just like an old lady killing teenagers because she didn't like their morals, or something.
Yeah.
It's like
In other news, why was she able to take out the teenagers like that? Like they usually
strong
have
old lady,
superior
man.
strength,
Yeah, but if you sneak up on them,
Yeah, because they're in the middle of the
having
hanky
sex,
panky.
yeah, that's not
Don't
what's
have
how.
hanky panky in Cam Silver Lake.
Yeah, so that's.
Remember the
And don't play
Nintendo
that video
of
game
that?
either. Oh man, yeah. So, Dan, what would you collect? What's
Yeah,
your thing?
come on, dude.
I thought we said about buying haunted houses. I kind of like that.
Yeah, right.
Don't say experiences because then we're gonna.
No.
That doesn't count.
I'm trying to think of something ridiculous I could try to like buy up all of it so no one else could have it just to do it, just for fun, oh no, I was gonna say scary dolls. I definitely don't want that.
No, don't do that, man.
no.
No, that's a bad. That's a. And then you got to unload them too. Occasionally.
Oh god. Ugh.
Rather than haunted houses, I think the haunted hotel is kind of a little more fun, like the Shining thing with a cool maze and stuff, like something like that. Like that's because it's like you have more opportunity for space. You could just be like, yeah, you can go to the haunted pool hall part or the haunted bar. It can have
Make everybody sign a release.
multiple spots in just one location, and if it's prime location, that's like you got a pretty cool place as well.
I think I'm down for the haunted hotel thing too. I mean, haunted locations in general are just kind of.
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely something haunted, and I would monetize it for sure. I would definitely, I would go that road. I would go all out, or maybe even buy people's houses that it's, allegedly haunted and just, try to monetize it. I'd be all over that. That'd be so much fun.
And places that look like they should be haunted and get them to be haunted.
Right, exactly.
Hopefully not through, depending what you're doing. Well, I guess if you're doing broken ritual magic that you screw up, and have demons everywhere.
Or if you just wander around and find all the restless dead and be like, you can live here.
You raise them up from this.
Yeah, you find out what that wizard did at Boleskine.
I guess in order to do that, we have to just kind of go back in time, right?